Despite being arguably both one of the most popular and powerful disaster curses, Mahito still has a lot of mystery surrounding him. And on top of that, we don't really see enough of him in the main series in my opinion. He's the only curse to land a Black Flash, he has a hacks ability with his Idle Transfiguration curse technique, and as a result has a busted domain expansion. And through those abilities, he removed 3 characters from the story for over 130 chapters, one of which he removed permanently. And along with all of that, he has the final spoken dialogue in the entire series of JJK. He got the last words. Because of this, I feel like we should have seen a bit more of him before the Shibuya incident. Well, the light novels helped fix this problem of mine. I've previously covered 2 other stories from the light novels, and this will be the 3rd. In this story, we follow Mahito and his actions before his introduction, before meeting Junpei in the movie theatre, seeing how he interacts and views humans alongside how he interacts with disaster curses. Now, with that small introduction out the way, let's discuss story number 3, Allegory in Darkness. The story itself starts with the disaster curses finding a new base of operations in an office building in the city, at the behest of Pseudo Ghetto, as he was still called at this point. All the while, Jogo himself is setting the office workers on fire and laughing about it, which is a very Jogo thing to do. As the disaster curses are shown to us, Hanami sends their thoughts into the other cursors' heads. This means that the other cursors don't understand what Hanami is actually saying, it's just that Hanami sends their thoughts into the heads of the other disaster curses, which is something Jogo really doesn't like the feeling of, so he gets mad at Hanami. Also, Dagon isn't here either. Maybe he's just chilling in his own domain with Kenjaku, who knows? As Hanami, Jogo and Mahito are clearing out this building, Jogo notices that Mahito is quite absent-mindedly looking around the interior of this building, this new base of operations. So, Jogo questions him. Page 64. What's wrong, Mahito? Are you unsatisfied? What don't you like? It's a good location to prepare an attack on the city and to flee if necessary. Yeah, I guess so, but yes, but well, spit it out. The interior decor is really tasteless, Mahito said. Huh? A small eruption came from Jogo's head with a poof. As the two argue, Jogo can't understand what has been making Mahito act so strange as of late. Then we get a big introduction to something that is a core theme to understanding Mahito's character, as well as a parallel to some other characters. And on top of that is a theme or hobby that will have a chain reaction and result in the deaths and development of multiple characters, including himself. Page 64 again. It's the movies. Movies. You like movies? They're nothing but superficialities, Jogo said. Actually, they're a reliable resource to study the soul, Mahito said. A human looking at him then might think he resembled an elementary school student puffed up with pride as he recited knowledge he acquired for a book report. To be honest, it isn't a very interesting topic for me either, but I don't exactly dislike human visual aesthetics. Still, this room is too colourful, it hurts my eyes. Mahito, displeased with the feng shui of the disaster curse's new super secret base, decides to just leave and find a place where he can relax on his own, just letting the other curses handle getting set up as he casually waves goodbye to just do his own thing, causing Jogo to act like the hothead he is and get angry. However, at the same time, Jogo theorizes that Mahito's frivolous nature may be due to him being created from human fear. He's the most human out of the disaster curses after all, in both appearance and mentality, as we see with his rate of growth. So it makes sense for him to have more human sensibilities when compared to the other disaster curses. Well, at least on the surface, because as we see in Shibuya, Mahito is the most monstrous out of the 4. As Mahito leaves in search of his new own hideout, Jogo then pulls out his iconic human-shaped pipe, lights up, and then curses Mahito. Page 65. Drat that Mahito. Jogo swiveled his eye around the room. Now this looks tasteless to me too. That little interaction with the other disaster curses is unfortunately all we'll see of them throughout this story. However, what this story does do is it explains why Mahito hangs out in the sewers instead of with the other disaster curses at their hideout during the Versus Mahito arc. We cut back to Mahito, exploring the city. When coming upon traffic lights, he flippantly chooses to go left and right, simply exploring with a childlike, frivolous lack of intent, following nearby cats as they patrolled the area, following the clouds if their shapes intrigued him. As he moves around the city, he grows to understand more about his feelings towards humans, how humorous they are to him. This town is for humans, it belongs to them, yet none of the humans walking these streets walked as freely around them as Mahito did. Page 66. Everyone looked tense, bound by inhibitions and vanity, living short-sighted lives in a vast and fathomless city, without ever knowing how infinitely large the sky was. They took a city of stone, they had divided it up, further divided it as their souls saw fit, and lived subserviently within those narrow confines. As Mahito roams around, we grow to understand his mentality and how it mirrors other characters in the series. Page 66 again. Mahito came to understand their worldview through the words they used. For example, they called this morality, they called that common sense, and they called that emotion. Their souls received external stimuli, and they merely metabolized them. Like machines, this process controlled their bodies, so they feared the judgment of others, sought the world's favour, and relinquished their freedom. He remarks how the things humans created bind them to these lives, and that is why curses have to change human beings. If all they do is clumsily live like this, they should just give this world to the curses. Page 66 yet again. Think as your soul desires, walk where the wind blows. A philosophy like this feels like something coming from Sukuna or an early Gojo. Do what you want when you want. It feels very reminiscent of those characters and their views on the world, as well as how the strongest should act. However, in Mahito's case, it is people on a whole, less so just the strong. Mahito then comes to a very familiar looking spot. The place he found to call his new hideout could be found under a large bridge that crosses over a river. Below said bridge is a wide tunnel. The tunnel was seemingly filled with plumbing around the walls and ceiling. This area probably feels as you imagine it does, just from looking at it. The air is damp and humid, smelling like moss, and on top of that the temperature is cold due to the area being majorly concrete. The lighting in the area was also perfect for Mahito, appearing gloomy and, quote, perfect for breeding fear. All of these unappealing characteristics to us humans were all to Mahito's liking. It was refreshing to him. Mahito then gleefully bounces around his new humble abode. However, he senses the presence of something in the sewers alongside him. Upon first seeing it, he merely assumes it was a pile of trash, the effects of humans littering nearby, but as he glances, he notices the shape of this thing's soul. Page 67. Oh, so it's alive. It was a man wrapped in an old cloth. His long hair and beard had obscured his human shape. His exact age wasn't readily apparent. He might have been 60 or over 80, elderly at any rate. Mildly annoyed at this old man's appearance in his newly found home, Mahito let out a brief sigh. Despite this, however, Mahito knows how easy it is to solve such an issue, so he extends his hand towards this decrepit figure. Page 67 again. Sorry if you find me unpleasant. Huh? I don't know what you've come for, but finding an old-timer like me here must have spoiled your mood. But I don't have anywhere to go either. Don't forget that Mahito here is a curse. No human should be able to see him, or at least none that aren't sorcerers, but this intriguing person can. He must have some innate cursed energy, just been born with cursed energy, and as a result can see spirits, and just happen to never become a cursed user or sorcerer. So, out of curiosity, Mahito looks closer to the man's face. His eyes, they weren't there. He could see him, but he didn't have eyes. His eyes were covered in burn scars, covering both of the man's eye sockets. Page 68. You can see me? The old man nodded in response to Mahito's question. I can sense you, even though you can't see your surroundings. Of course, like the scenery, it's unclear to me what kind of features you have, what colour your skin is, or whether you're a man or a woman, said the old man. Nonetheless, I know you're there. Mahito questions this newly found pest inside his home, asking if he's a sorcerer. The man is seemingly confused by the question and simply replies that he doesn't think so. He takes another glance at the man's soul because something seems off. So you see, most human souls fluctuate. They quiver, they can be a variety of shapes and sizes, but they always fluctuate. This man, however, is an outlier. You see, his soul is peaceful. It fluctuates very little. It was like a, quote, grassy field with no wind, a sea with no waves, a blue sky with no clouds. No, Mahito realized the more appropriate comparison was to a rock. He had a soul like a boulder by the side of the road, unadorned, unpolished, unmoving, unwavering. It just passed the time in tranquility, quietly gathering moss. That was the shape of the old man's soul. This is fascinating to Mahito. He had never in his time living so far seen a soul such as this. Human souls waver. No matter how mild, cool, calm, collected they appear to be on the surface, they waver. But this man's soul did not. It was peaceful. A soul that had accepted its own death through the passage of time, and as a result, wouldn't waste its life in pointless distress. Page 69 again. It was almost like a truly natural existence. Mahito had never encountered a human being like that before. Mahito then spends his time growing accustomed to his new hideout, leaving the homeless man to do his own business. In the meantime, Mahito sets up a hammock and spends his time reading and gaining more knowledge on the human world. And funnily enough, the idea to put up a hammock is an idea Mahito got from watching a movie. Mahito proceeds to then question the old man sometime later, wondering how he even survives, as Mahito notices that the man sits in the corner, expressionless for hours. But then sometimes when Mahito would leave and come back, he'd be gone. And then sometimes he'd appear back there at his post, so to speak. Mahito would even notice the man getting a bit skinnier, but he'd quickly disappear for a while and reappear after seemingly eating, looking much fuller. This manner of existence is almost strictly instinctual. Mahito loudly speculates in his hideout to himself that maybe this lifestyle is the reason for the old man being able to see him. But after noticing that the old man's soul was unwavered by this hypothesis after hearing it, Mahito asks the man a question directly. Page 70. How long have you been here? Well, I suppose I've passed a few winters here, but I'm not certain. The old man answered with a quiet mutter. Mahito understands that if two beings are coexisting in the same area, it's natural for them to have a conversation from time to time. So they continue. Page 71. Don't you get bored? Mahito spoke casually, and the old man responded in kind. I forgot how to be bored. Mahito continued to question the man. What do you do all the time? Nothing. I just listen to sounds. Sounds? The sounds of flowing water, the man responded. Is that fun? No, but I've forgotten to have fun, so it doesn't bother me. Mahito thought that made sense and nodded. Mahito still thinks to himself about how remarkable this man's soul is. He must truly want nothing. Wants and greediness cause the souls to change over time. No soul can be truly satisfied forever, or they fluctuate at the fear of losing their satisfaction after they claim it. Souls are always changing from fear of something, whilst this man's soul fascinatingly remains still, polished, stylish even. So he questions the man further, asking for his name, just for the old man to reply that he doesn't have one. He doesn't need one, really. Mahito glibly wonders what name will be put on the man's grave if he doesn't have a name. The man calmly replies that he'll probably be put in a mass grave or simply rot away somewhere. Mahito states that he was joking when he said that and is shocked that the man couldn't tell that he was kidding. From this, Mahito sees an innocence, a youth within this old man, which only causes him further intrigue in learning more about him. Mahito asks why the old man came here. Why is he living like a rat in the sewers? So the old man obliges and answers. He was once your standard average working man. He had a wife and a family. He worked. He inherited a house. He had status, Mahito remarks. The man agrees. However, he reveals that he lost it all. How so? He was swindled, tricked, deceived. Turns out his wife and an old friend of the man's had been having an affair together, and they burnt his eyes, but they made it look like an accident and claimed that they were looking after him. But before the old man realized it, the two traitors had taken all of his assets. Despite all this, however, the man claims that the despair he felt wasn't from losing everything that he owned. It was that the people that he loved each other, but none of them loved him. Mahito struggles to interpret this. The curse knows love as a concept in the realm of humans, from the outside looking in, so to speak, but he doesn't understand why that's what affected the old man the most. Page 73. Didn't you curse the people who tricked you? He asked. Not particularly. The old man replied. Not particularly, huh? People in such circumstances get angry and bear a grudge, then their souls degenerate. Yes, but I didn't have the energy to seek revenge or to make them suffer. Oh, I see. Mahito nodded in understanding. From Mahito's exploration of humans and their creations, such as movies, books, etc., despite not understanding it fully, he could somewhat grasp why he believed the man wouldn't have the energy to seek revenge, saying that it was probably from an intense despair that drained him whilst he was at rock bottom. But that's not what the old man meant, saying that what he was feeling wasn't a bottomless despair. Page 74. I didn't experience anger or dismal sadness. I think I was just tired. Work, acclaim, status, responsibility, social responsibilities, finances, fame, those things were exhausting. So exhausting that they emptied me. And that's why you didn't get angry at the deception? It was a relief. They say hopelessness can make one feel lighter. The old man's voice had a cold clarity, like impure water that had passed through a filter. It sounded peaceful. After losing every worldly possession the man had, along with his eyes, he was truly free. He was no longer restrained by the society around him, nor by the things he saw. Page 74 again. When you can't see, sound stretches to infinity. and there's only the wind. There aren't any walls partitioning the city. There's just a limitless darkness like a starless sky. It was the first time I had experienced the world as an open space, and I realised I was free. Mahito's growing understanding of this figure even has him quoting J.R.R. Tolkien of all people. Page 75. "Not all those who wander are lost, huh?" Mahito said. Isn't that a bit depressing for a quote from Tolkien? Mahito smiled at how the old man immediately identified the quote, one Mahito had read in a random book he'd picked up. Mahito then says to the old man that if every human in the world was like him, he wouldn't have been born. Here is a curse and a human simply coexisting with each other, passing time, calmly, together. If you haven't noticed this yet, the story has a lot of parallels between some stories related to the Buddha, right? And just to make all those parallels a bit clearer, the next thing we read that Mahito does is he finds a worn-out copy of the Heart Sutra. Mahito believes that the old man, though unintentionally, has reached a state of enlightenment. That's why he can sense Mahito. Page 76. He must have already had the potential. After all, it's easy for talent to bloom in introverts. If Mahito pondered the old man further, he might be able to guess sorcerers' training methods and techniques for manifesting cursed energy. Then he might be able to turn talented human beings into sorcerers and cursed users. He might be able to spur a cursed user he had groomed into becoming a sorcerer. That would be an interesting experiment. It was easier to upset human souls by making them fight each other than by having them exercise curses, and he doubted Sukuna's vessel was any exception. However, maybe I'll save that for later. This line is in reference to Junpei, clearly, but also by proxy, referencing the Culling Games players who are turned into curse users and sorcerers through Kenjaku using Mahito's idol transfiguration. Mahito then takes a couple more books to read peacefully in his little hideout. He starts quite happily strolling home, humming all the while, until he hears two men talking in a nearby alley. A built, bald man and a skinnier man with long hair. The bald guy basically keeps saying that he could kill anyone, quote, "Killing ain't nothing." Nothing much happens here. Mahito just watches and listens to them talk about killing someone. Anyone, really. They just want to do it for street cred, so to speak. But Mahito just observes them voyeuristically, and due to his ability to see the shape of the soul as well, he can just see that they're full of it, right? They're not going to kill anyone, so he just continues to walk home. Then we cut to Mahito reading Kafka, of all things, and questioning why the main character became a bug.
Yeah. Totally Kafkaesque.
Page 78. Most people think it's allegorical, said the old man. Allegorical? An allegory for how society hated him and treated him like an insect. Like an old man who gets deceived and has his eyes burnt out. Was that a joke? Mahito asked. No, not really. Mahito has been trying to understand humans more and more through consuming their creations like movies and books, as I say. And the old man is intelligent, and he has been helping Mahito to interpret some of the subtleties of the media he is consuming, acting like a nearby Wikipedia that helps whenever Mahito is struggling to understand what the human side of what he's looking at is. I mean, when you take a step back and look at what's happening, Mahito, this guy, is reading Kafka whilst discussing it with a homeless man, and at the same time, Mahito is recognizing that the old man is quoting Virginia Woolf of all things in the conversation. Like, this is just wild in a nutshell, right? Page 78. Gregor is an insect, so his family tries to keep him hidden, but he crawls out and dies in the end. Why do you think that is, old man? Because you cannot find peace by avoiding life. That's Virginia Woolf, isn't it? The old man raised an eyebrow at Mahito's recognition of the quote. Throughout this literary conversation, Mahito was looking at his book the entire time, not looking up or at the man as he was speaking. It's this simply peaceful interaction. Unfortunately, however, this is JJK, and this character is Mahito that we're talking about, so this story cannot end on a peaceful and quaint note. Obviously, Mahito had left the tunnel in search of some more books and poems to take back to said tunnel. But upon him entering his hideout, he senses 3 souls inside. The old man's, which was weakened, flickering away like a candle's flame, fading, and 2 others. The 2 men from earlier, actually, the long-haired, skinnier man and the bald, built one. They entered the tunnel and found the man, and as he shouted at them to leave, the 2 men attacked him, and due to the man's age and frailty, began dying slumped on the ground, his face swelling and bleeding from the blunt force trauma he's taken. Yet his facial expression was that of one at peace. Page 80. Are you dying? Mahito questioned the old man in a whisper. Yes, I believe so, the old man rasped. In this moment, Mahito checked on his soul during his dying moments to see if it had changed. Yet it remained still. Mahito watched on, viewing this man in a similar way to one watching a flower wilt away, a beauty slowly leaving. However, This didn't remain. Page 80 again. I expected to die alone. The old man's soul wavered. A smile formed on his swollen features. But there's someone here to watch an old man give up the ghost. It was like watching a single drop ripple the surface of water, an inconsequential event, yet it was the moment of the old man's death. Here at the end of the very end, the old man's soul metabolized. Thank you. And the old man died with a smile on his lips. Mahito is left speechless, wide-eyed, trying to comprehend what has just happened. He thought that this man was different. He was an exception from other human beings. He thought he had reached some state of enlightenment after losing all of his worldly bonds, but he forged a bond at the moment of his death with Mahito himself. He died with satisfaction and a smile on his face, and Mahito is the reason for it. So Mahito remains silent. He feels cold. He feels as if wind is blowing through him. He doesn't know how to describe this feeling, this emotion, but it's described as feeling like standing in an arid wasteland. As Mahito is coming to grips with what has just happened and trying to rationalize it, the two intruders are still complaining to each other how that homeless guy got their clothes dirty, wondering if they'll be able to get the blood out. As if doing something so nonchalant as throwing out the trash, Mahito uses his curse technique on the two attackers. Simply killing them, though, would leave a mess, and he doesn't want to clean that up. He transforms these intruders' bodies into a size akin to a chess piece. Mahito looks at the body of the old man. Nothing more than a sack of meat and bones now. He isn't alive, so a soul doesn't reside inside for Mahito to transform with his curse technique. He looks on at the body of the old man, thinking about how much of a problem it's going to be to dispose of. We then cut to Mahito wandering the town again, pondering whether or not to see a movie. Page 82. He chose a small, old-looking theatre and snuck inside. He'd been more motivated recently, as if an unnecessary burden had fallen from his soul, leaving him lighter. We then find out that, as of late, Mahito's been tinkering with more humans. If he can shrink them down and fit them in his pocket, how large can he make them? He's been experimenting with transfigured humans lately, but at the moment, he wasn't going to push himself. He throws away the transfigured humans he made earlier in the movie theatre's lobby. They were starting to change shape again, so he just throws them away. Then he goes into the theatre itself and looks around. It was nearly empty. Probably since it was the middle of the week, but all who were around were seemingly students. Page 83. Mahito stood in a corner and waited for the images to appear on the screen. Then darkness descended, signaling the start of the film. In conclusion, this story is about Mahito meeting someone who challenges the way he thinks. Despite being human, this nameless and eyeless man has acquired such a unique soul that Mahito believes he has reached some level of enlightenment. However, his own preconceptions about the man are proven to be true in the man's literal final moments, only through Mahito's own actions. Through making small talk and just simply communicating with the man, Mahito formed a bond with this man that proved his preconceptions and prejudices correct. The story itself also gives us an origin for the small transfigured humans that Mahito uses when fighting. He made them simply as an adaptation so he didn't have to clean up any messy remains. The short story also gives us some added context and planning for Mahito's actions with Junpei, as well as how his plans to test Yuji's mental limits were always part of his plan before Mahito even saw or met Yuji. Maybe due to how significant Sukuna's vessel was to Kenjaku's plan, maybe Mahito heard about Yuji through Jogo's interaction with Gojo, as Gojo brought Yuji to the battlefield. Who knows? Maybe Mahito grew fascinated and wanted to break him out of curiosity, but he was planning to break Sukuna's vessel from the start. Also, you can interpret Mahito's actions at the end of the story two ways as well. Was Mahito feeling sadness and loss after the old man's death, or was he merely annoyed and maybe saddened or frustrated at the fact that he was proven right and his interest in the man was wasted? Overall, there's a lot you can say about this story. It doesn't have too much substance and relevance in the actual plot itself, but it is very interesting to see what happens here and with Mahito as a character. Overall, I enjoyed it. Whilst it can be pretty slow as not too much actually happens and it's very dialogue heavy, and especially with the old man's attackers for some reason, the story itself was an intriguing insight into how the disaster curse's mind works. Let me know if you want me to cover the other light novels, the other stories from the light novels. If you like this one, feel free to watch my other light novel videos, or maybe feel free to watch this video about the new sorcerers in JJK Phantom Parade. But either way, thank you for watching, and with that being said, toodles my doodles, hopefully see you in the next one. Peace.